couldn't find the guy where he lived anymore. Finally, my wife found where he lived on the phone some way. So it was on a Sunday afternoon, we drove up to his house where we thought he lived. Must have woke him up. He come out of the house, rubbing his eyes, and I hadn't seen him for about 15 years. I didn't even recognize him. And he looked at me, and the first thing he said to me was the serial number of my guitar. He didn't even know why I was there.
So about 5 years ago, my brother-in-law was showing us the 50th anniversary video that he made for his parents. In this anniversary video, it's kind of giving the background of his mom and his dad. And when it got to his dad, it mentioned how he was in an early rock and roll band in Montevideo, Minnesota, called the 17s. And it showed a picture of the 17s. And I said, "Stop the video, stop. That's a 59 Les Paul." And I was like, who is this guy, and do you know if he still has the guitar? Is he still alive? Like, who is this guy? And he said, "Oh yeah, that's Verlin Kling." I was like, "Verlin who?"
Check, 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 1, 2. Kansas City, here I come. Kansas City. My name is Verlin Kling. I've been playing in bands 64 plus years, and I usually do over 100 shows a year. I call myself now the four-wheel drive one-man band now. I'm 79 years old now and still at it. Give me a call if you want music. Well, I was 15 years old when I bought the Les Paul with a hard-shelled case and an amplifier. I bought it at the music store in Montevideo on Main Street for $440, which was quite a bit of money back then. Well, the 17s band, I was the only guitar player of the group. Singer. We were a pretty good band. We went to a lot of different places. We were too young to play in the bars, so we did mostly ballrooms and high school proms. Yeah, we played a show at the Fiesta Ballroom, I think it was 2 weeks after Buddy Holly was there. Here's the poster. 17s. Admission $1. This is me the day before I went in the Navy. They had a party for me.
Really thoughtful of them to make you play on your own going away party.
Yeah, I wasn't very happy.
You don't look very happy.
So that anniversary video led me to Verlin, and obviously I wanted to know if he still had his guitar, because we're talking about one of the rarest guitars and most desirable guitars ever made.
What would you do if you found a 59 Les Paul?
Oh man, we always talk about this here at the show. We always talk about you go visit your 92-year-old grandfather, and then you look in the closet and it's
Oh, I got that 40 years ago at a pawn shop.
I'd play it.
I'd play it.
I'd play it. I would definitely play it. I'm not one to just sneak it underneath the bed and let it sit there and rot, for sure. I would be one of those guys that you'd see out there playing it, which you can call me crazy, I guess. But I think the 59 is so iconic. It's because of who played it.
The 1959 Les Paul is valuable because of its rarity, but more so because of the musicians who played it. All of the most influential guitarists out there have owned and played a 59 Les Paul standard. Early on, Keith Richards was on the Ed Sullivan Show playing a 59 Les Paul standard. And then we see Michael Bloomfield from the Paul Butterfield Band playing it. And then Joe Walsh picked it up, and then Eric Clapton picked it up, and Jimmy Page, and the list goes on and on. So I just had an opportunity to speak with Jimmy Page about his Les Paul standards and why he gravitated towards them, because he was playing a different brand guitar before them. And he said the primary reason that he chose the 1959 Les Paul was because on stage at loud volumes, it didn't feed back, or when it did feed back, he could control it. Other manufacturers of guitars weren't really considering their usage in very high volume environments, and that's really why I think they were as popular as they were during the hard rock revolution. There are very few 1959 Les Paul standards that are still unaccounted for. I should say that there's also quite a few fakes and knockoffs that are made that try to pass as the real thing. We're pretty good at sorting those out. So Verlin's is interesting because there's a beautiful book called The Beauty of the Burst that was done in the 1990s, mid-1990s, and it has by serial number photos of all of these guitars. And his is in the perfect gap between two serial numbers in the book, and it would be in there, if it was accounted for.
My number of the Les Paul is 9-0594. There's 9-3. Mine should be sitting in here. It goes from 9-3 to 9-7. When I got out of the Navy, then I formed other bands. Then I'd go into supper clubs and play myself. I was called Verlin and his Les Paul. And then I started a band called Four Wheel Drive. And then wife and I have 3 sets of identical twin boys. They were with me in the band. Not all at one time, though. And then I didn't use the Les Paul anymore because we switched to a little country and I wanted to have a brighter sound, A friend of mine got his stolen, and he wanted to use mine one night after his got stolen, and I wouldn't let him use it because everybody seemed to be drawn to it. They probably knew what it was worth, which I didn't at the time, We didn't have no internet or nothing, Till one day this guy called me and wanted to know if he could come and see the Les Paul. So he came over and looked at it. We went down to the music room and he asked if he could play it, and I said, sure. What would you take if you sold it? He said. I thought for a while. I said, well, how about $3,600? Well, being you made up your mind so fast, I'll give you $3,650. And I thought, what'd they do here,
In the late 80s, he sold it and then bought a different guitar instead, which he liked, and he wasn't too regretful about it, but he is still curious about the current whereabouts of his guitar, as am I. I think it'll show up someday, but it's not in any of the major collections globally. What makes this guitar special, it has the most spectacular original flame top. So what that means is the figuring in the maple of the top was side to side like tiger stripe flame. And the difference between a guitar with figure in the top like that and a guitar with a plain maple top can be $500,000. It's extremely desirable to have a guitar like that. I think Verlin's guitar could be worth as much as $700,000 if it shows up with the provenance and if the top is as figures as it looks in those photos.
It's funny because a lot of guys, back in the 50s and 60s didn't think twice about it. They didn't think that their guitar was going to be worth $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. At that point in time, they were like us, where you go pick up a guitar off the shelf now, it's between $200 to $2,000, and you go play the what out of it. Yeah, play guitar and then write songs, and the next thing you know, it could be like this mysterious mystique item that everybody wants to get their hands on, because that's exactly what happened with Les Pauls, is that it started creating this persona behind it.
The part of my job that I enjoy most is researching vintage instruments and analyzing them, scanning them, really understanding how they were constructed inside and out, and then we recreate them here at the custom shop. So we use 3D scans of original examples to find the accurate neck profiles, the top contours, recreate the parts exactly how they were, and then as you can see in this one, even recreate the way that they aged. So originally in 1959, Les Paul would have been cherry sunburst, and they all faded because the dye that they used in the cherry sunburst fades into green and then out to yellow. So this is called a kind of a green lemon sunburst now. So it looks like what a guitar would fade into over time. This guitar also has a beautiful figure top that looks a lot like Verlin's guitar. And every detail of this guitar has been kind of authentically recreated from known examples. So including the aging on the back and the checking and all the little dings that the guitar would acquire over time. Even the look of the back of the peg head being roughed up. Originally, Gibson electric guitars were made in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and sometime in the mid-1970s, Gibson began to move to Nashville. What's cool is we still have a lot of the original machinery and tooling and fixturing from the 1950s that we still use in our guitars today, including the Les Paul standards.
This is the slack belt sander machine, and what's cool is this machine was used to make Les Pauls in the 1950s.
And then we have an amazing staff of people here at Gibson Custom Shop. So they are very passionate about recreating history and providing the vintage ownership experience. My favorite part of the Verlin story is when he was trying to track it down, he went over to the gentleman's house who had purchased the guitar. And when the guy opened the door and saw Verlin, he immediately recited the serial number, 90594. And Verlin, thought, oh, well, maybe he still has the guitar, but then the guy couldn't remember any details of what happened to the guitar, which I find very suspicious. Since we know the gentleman's name who purchased it, I tried to do some research about if that person has bought and sold vintage guitars in the past. Was he known in the vintage guitar circles? And I just can't find anything about him. But obviously, to buy a guitar like that for the price that he paid at the time, he knew what he was doing, and he knew how spectacular Verlin's example was.
At that time, I told this guy, I says, I'm not bad that I sold it to you or anything, I made a good profit on it. We just want to find where it is. Oh, he says, I can't tell you that to protect the buyer. So they're still looking for it.
My message for the person out there that has Verlin's guitar is you're welcome, because we have so much provenance for that guitar that will add to the value by telling Verlin's story, by giving Verlin's photos, by sharing this whole story that we're talking about now. It really increases the value of the instrument to have that provenance. So you're welcome. That's really the important thing, is keeping his story with the guitar.
Do you ever wish you had your Les Paul back?
Not really. Money would be good, I suppose. What would I do with it if I didn't play it? Sit and look at it?
Cards is made possible by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota. Additional support provided by Margaret A. Cargill Philanthropies, Mark and Margaret Yakel-Julien on behalf of Shalom Hill Farms, a retreat and conference center in a prairie setting near Windham, Minnesota. On the web at shalomhillfarm.org. Alexandria, Minnesota, a year-round destination with hundreds of lakes, trails, and attractions for memorable vacations and events. More information at explorealex.com. The Lake Region Arts Council's Arts Calendar, an arts and cultural heritage funded digital calendar showcasing upcoming art events and opportunities for artists in West Central Minnesota. On the web at lrac4calendar.org. Playing today's new music plus your favorite hits, 96.7 Cram. Online at 967cram.com.